Call this meeting of the Public Safety Committee to order. Joining me here today, we have Committee Member Mayor Pro Temp Vivian Burke. To my right, we have Councilmember Jeff McIntosh. We're also joined by a representative from the South Ward, Councilmember Molly Light. With us representing public safety, we have our police chief, Chief Anthony Farmer, our police chief, Chief Barry Roundtree, our fire chief, Chief Anthony Farmer. I wanted to back up and make sure I got that right. Thank everyone for being here today. Members of the committee, are there any items on the consent agenda that should be pulled for consideration and discussion? If there are none, I would entertain a motion.
Move approval. Second.
So motion and properly second. All in favor, please show by saying aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. Item G1.
Consideration of amendments to Chapters 34, 38, and 74 of the City Code relating to panhandlers and foot peddlers door-to-door solicitors. This item was continued from the February meeting with the Public Safety Committee.
All right, giving this report is Attorney Lori Sykes.
Thank you. Good evening. This is a follow-up to our discussion at the February meeting where we first brought forth two proposals for consideration. One has to do with panhandlers who are already fall under the licensing requirement in the City Code, and we're just suggesting that we add to that an identification badge requirement that the panhandlers would wear and display on their persons while they're engaging in panhandling activities. That badge would have a photograph of the person, and it would display the expiration date of their current privilege license. And this is proposed in order to assist police officers with enforcement of the ordinance and to assist citizens in knowing that this person who is engaging in this activity has been properly licensed and permitted by the city to do that. So that was one item that we discussed and is still up for discussion. And then the second item had to do with door-to-door solicitation, also referred to as foot peddler activity. And we were proposing an update to the city ordinances that address this and a consolidation of some of those provisions in one single ordinance that the draft was presented to you previously. There were a couple of questions. There were a couple of questions and concerns that were raised at the last committee meeting as to the door-to-door solicitation ordinance, and the materials that we provided you address those questions and concerns. I'd be happy to address them further or to answer any additional questions. But we did take those concerns and comments, and you have an amended draft of the door-to-door solicitation ordinance, as well as the amendments that would be necessary to enact the identification requirement for the panhandler privilege license. I think in the door-to-door solicitation ordinance also there was a request for a draft letter to the district attorney to solicit his support and assistance in enforcing these ordinances, and we did prepare that draft letter, and it should be included in your package also.
Members of the committee, it appears that the suggestions that we've made at the last committee meeting have been adjusted in reference to permitting and foot peddling. Is there anyone who wishes to be heard at this particular time? So it seems to me, based on general consensus, we're okay with the item as presented. All right, I don't believe that this item is for consideration at this point. I believe we will hold it in committee just to make sure we've got all of the nuts and bolts involved before we move forward. Madam City Attorney, I do know that Councilmember Bessie wished to make an addition to the letter to the district attorney. Do you happen to have that addition, or we'd make sure that we have that before you move forward?
I will make sure I provide. He did hand it to me. It's a little hard to read, but I'll make sure I provide it to you at the next meeting or email it to you so everybody has understanding. It's just one additional sentence, pretty straightforward. It doesn't change the meaning of the letter at all, but I'd rather just provide it, type it out and provide it to you via email or at the next meeting.
Is that okay with the committee? Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Attorneys.
May I ask the attorneys a question
Mayor
before
Pro
we go
Tem.
to the next one? When you look at people who have these people standing on the corner without permits, just selling their whatever they have, how do we address that?
When we become aware of those instances, those individuals have been told to go obtain the proper permits from revenue and the other appropriate departments.
Mr. City Manager, I feel that this city is doing not a good job. Every other corner in some neighborhoods, you see people selling whatever they have, and I don't believe that they have their permits. And then there are other citizens who are doing the right thing, getting their permits, and we're making them pay. And I think we should make a special effort to have someone to go out. Which department would be working with these people who are illegally doing what they're doing?
It will be revenue, and also based upon the changes that were being proposed, revenue and community and business development department.
How are we going to do that, monitor the people who are doing wrong? How will we check them, rather?
I think we'll probably have to set up a process to do that, and we can provide a report.
Well, you have an awful lot of people doing wrong, and that's going to take a lot of time, really. And I was wondering, do we even have that kind of time, Mr. City Manager?
It will take more time. Offhand, probably the easiest way is to ask community business development inspectors who are already out in the neighborhoods to try to address the most severe of the problems.
Oh, yeah, you asked the inspectors will be out there,
Yes.
so they'll be sent. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Mayor Pro Tem Burke, I imagine that we can also do it on a complaint-driven basis. So if anyone is aware that this is occurring, please contact 311 is CityLink, or you can contact the manager's office or any one of us here at the table, and we will seek to address it as soon as possible. Councilmember Light.
Thank you. Certainly, once we get the ID tags, that'll make it easier for citizens to be able to say, aha, you're not licensed, and to be able to call in a location. I know there's one location, Medical Center Boulevard in Cloverdale. I mean, it's someone, and is it not true no one's supposed to stand in the median?
There is not supposed to be panhandling on the median, that is correct.
Yeah.
And we do, the police officers are there constantly trying to keep up with that, monitor that, and address complaints that come in.
Yeah, okay. But it'll be easier once we have ID tags, yeah.
Let me also
Yes, Attorney.
mention that we are still looking at the do not solicit registry. As we mentioned, I guess in February, that process is a long-term process and will take some time to draft and once adopted, implement. So we are still looking at that. But in the interim, we think this might be a measure to address the hours that are at issue in terms of some of the door-to-door solicitors coming out late at night, and then identification issues as well.
And the overall general purpose of this amendment to the city code is not to attack foot peddlers, and it's not to attack panhandlers. It's just to make sure that our citizens who are going about their everyday activities in this city, being as charitable as we can be, are being safe and they're being protected by this council and this committee, by our management and attorney staff. So thank all those who are involved. Ladies, have you finished?
Yes.
Yes.
I know there was a particular gentleman in the back who wished to be heard. Sir, if you would come to the front and give your name and address for the record. And Madam City Secretary, is 3 to 4 minutes okay from the committee? Because I imagine that may be a number of people who want to speak for the next. Thank you.
Sounds great. My name is Brian Hayhurst. I live at 411 Hearthside Drive in the Sherwood Forest area. Have met with our city attorney, and she's been very helpful. My concern is that we have, the registry was an idea that I feel it would be very wise for our city. It would allow us to tie in possibly through the databases and like our tax database and find a way for a user sign-in. But I mean, the analytics side of that would kind of bring us to the modern day realm, so that if you wanted to know an agency, not only does a city resident, I preferably do not like commercial activity at my home. You know, your home is your refuge. It's a place to be kept safe. Living in the Sherwood Forest area, there are multiple widows. There's several that I've tried to look after and take care of the best that I can. But the issue is you've got people coming to your home in the middle of the workday, knocking on your door. You don't know who they are. I've got several friends that work for the city PD, and you know, their comments to me are, Brian, there's a lot of folks out here that are looking at checking out your homes, right, that you don't know their motives. And I appreciate the badge idea. That's great. But it's still to protect our rights as a city. You know, as a citizen who loves my city and loves my fellow man, it's a situation where I want to stop them. So they said, hey, put up some signs, right? So city PD officer said, put up some signs, no trespassing signs. And my position for all of us is, okay, can you imagine if we put up these black neon signs at every person's property who didn't want someone there? What would that, from an appearance perspective, make our city look like, first of all? But the second side of the analytics to build a registry would be if you all wanted to know, well, who's coming actively and asking for permits. Like, and you wanted to track those analytics and see maybe their industries, their sectors, and who they are. That would also help. But real quick, March 27th, pulling out of work from a home-based office, I'm pulling out, and there's 2 men at my front door. Two signs posted in Sherwood Forest, right? Upper driveway, lower driveway, and I come out of the driveway and start going towards the upper driveway, and one of the men notices me, starts running towards my car, okay? So you can imagine, as a concealed weapons permit holder and a person who likes to protect my rights, I'm like, this guy's running towards my car. And one of the ones, I said, did either one of you two see the signs? And he said, yes. Why did you come on the property? And I could not get a clear answer out of him. So I called the city PD to do what was been requested upon me as a citizen. And Officer Timberlake notified the gentleman, found who they were, identified them. They had their permits. And I asked Officer Timberlake, did you write them a trespassing violation? His answer was no, I wasn't there. I said, well, I've got cameras and surveillance around, and I've got the footage, and I've got the evidence for you. Well, sir, we'd be more than happy to meet you down at the magistrate's office and let her define that. I said, but I've got the evidence, and there's the signs posted. So now the next concern for all of us is, I've done what I've been called to do, put the signs up, right, attempt to protect my premises, but 11:30, 11:20, in the middle of the workday, and these gentlemen happen to be with Edward Jones. And I'm thinking, now we've got commodity brokers coming to our doors. You know, in the past, the biggest issue is I've got people picking rocks. And I'm sure those of us that live in the city, you know, you got these rocks and these solicitations in plastic bags, which the Muni Code 62-9 says is littering on private property,
Yeah.
and they throw it on your driveways. They stick it in your door, they stick it on your mailbox, stick it in your mailbox, throw it on your front porch. They're putting it all over your premises. And so my next concern is we need to have a layer of protection to say, enough. Like, what else do we do? And so my voice is not just for me, and I wish I could have brought you a long petition, but I mean, I've got several widows. And my next door pastor and his wife and their 3 children, she says, Brian, I don't even feel, he's a pastor, his wife, I don't even feel comfortable going to the door of somebody I don't know, you know, in the Sherwood Forest area. So my concern is we need your help. And you know, we need something to stop the garbage and the litter from coming on there. We also need something so that our PD has some authority to protect our trespassing violations, because I've got the evidence and they still can't write a violation. So there's a gray area that's not being met, and I think that if we really wanted to bring our standards up, it would also bring a benefit to the people that want to move to this city and want to stay in this city.
Thank you for your comments.
Very well.
I will say that your comments have not fallen on deaf ears. They've fallen on very capable ears.
Amen.
And looking at our city attorney, looking at our city manager, we will do our best to address the gray area. I also believe that the registry is a good idea.
Absolutely.
And ultimately, we want to keep our citizens safe. We agree there, and we'll do what we can going forward.
Great.
Thank you
very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Item G2.
Second and third quarter medical call reduction report.
This presentation will be given by our fire chief, Chief Anthony Farmer.
I'd like to say good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Committee Chair,
Good evening.
Mayor Pro Tem, and committee members, management. Tonight, we're doing a short presentation on our medical call reduction. Just wanted to do a short recap of where we are. As you all recall, Tri-Data Consulting Group and the Citizen Efficiency Committee made some recommendations during their process, and basically said that our fire department should not be responding to so many medical calls, and recommended that we start responding to life-threatening calls only. And certainly after taking direction from U.S. Counsel, we started to implement a process to do that. We actually talked with county EMS, and once they found out that we were on the objective to do that, we wanted them to work with us in setting up a policy to do that. However, EMS wanted us to respond to all the requests that they sent to our dispatch center, so they have not really worked with us overall in the initial, at least, setup of the call process. So at this point in time, we've been trying to get the process to the place where we are responding to those calls that are life-threatening only, sort of aligning with what the department started with when it first got into medical response. Certainly, the impact on the department, we feel that once this process has taken place, reduction has enabled us to reduce the frequency of the apparatus being on emergency traffic, simply meaning the more that they are not responding to calls where it's not necessary, the less opportunity it is for them to have an accident. Decreased wear and tear on the vehicles, certainly instances where we're out of service and unable to respond is a huge concern, as well as duplication of services. The fire department wants to be able to make sure we meet our fire needs in lieu of responding quickly so that we can intervene in fires early. Interruptions and repeated trips back and forth during regular work activities. Certainly our department members have expressed to us over and over the pull on them in lieu of responding to calls throughout the day. 24 hours up and down, in and out of the trucks has really put a huge toll on them. I believe EMS actually went to 2 shifts to sort of compensate for that in lieu of their personnel having to respond to numerous calls on a 24-hour basis. So we're trying to make sure that we can keep our responses down and certainly work on fire issues such as pre-incident planning, training, and reporting. So in a quick review of the data, if you look at the charts or the graphs, you will see that in July, the department responded to 876 calls. Now, in the prior year, that 1696 was the number of calls we responded to in the prior year. We were requested, for example, in July, just over 1,200 times, and our reduction policy reduced that to 876 calls that month. That was a very high report month, roughly around 43%. And of course, you can see the months for August, September follow that pattern to where we are around 1,000 or just under 1,000 calls in terms of reduction. When you look at, following that, the next, in September, October, November, and December, we were expecting a similar change. However, in December, something happened. We received a call from some people that worked from the county and said that we were going to see a change in how the calls were being triaged and that they were going to be placed in a category that would actually require more response. So that actually happened. In December, we started responding to respiratory failure calls, and you can see in July we had 2 of those, 8, 5, 8 and 3, and so, et cetera, and so on. And of course, you see that significant change that occurred in December through March. And we've instituted a new process to sort of change that in April. Basically, all the appearance from looking at the data indicated that all the calls that were breathing were being placed in the respiratory failure calls category, and we changed the policy to reflect a change in that. And so that's what you see that's happening in April. So with that in mind, you can see that in the second quarter, again, this was the response profile for October, November, and December. There were around 1,000 calls reduction compared to just under 1,600 in October of the prior year. And of course, 900 compared to 1,600, and of course, 1,700 compared to 1,151. And also December, again, was the month where we had the change in policy, and the calls started to increase, which was significant in terms of that particular month. The third quarter, we saw similar results. We continued to look at the changes that had occurred and monitor that data, talking to our personnel, looking at data, and determined that most of those calls seemingly were breathing calls where our units were getting to the incidents, and there were instances of stomach aches, and basically no responses were needed because we didn't have to do medical treatment in numerous cases during those months. So in lieu of that, we changed that process and updated that policy again the first of this month. And of course, you can see the reflection in the calls each month there also. And of course, if we look at the reduction for the entire year from July till April, what you're seeing in the blue is the actual reduction that's occurring each month compared to the same month in the prior fiscal year. And certainly you can see the significant change in that we have projected about up to a 40% decrease in calls based on not touching the patient or delivering treatment in the prior years, and certainly that's what we have seen in the reduction. So what are the outcomes? Basically, our records and interactions with our staff We have saves. Over the past years, we had 8 saves last year, and 11 the year before that, and 7 before that. So totally, we do have saves in lieu of responding to a scene during CPR and using the defibrillator to shock people, and that's very positive. There are also instances where our people get to the scene and basically say, you know, people are on the steps with suitcases, no need to response, they're completely contrary to the type of call that they received or the information they received. Those are the things that we are trying to work on in terms of the reduction. Sometimes people are breathing when we arrive, when we get them to the ambulance. Sometimes they stop breathing. Sometimes people are conscious when we arrive and talking, and sometimes they may arrest even before EMS arrive. Sometimes people get better and worse, and we find that these have been the results that have occurred all along in the program. Recently, in dealing with the results, I know the EMS attributes those negative outcomes to reduction, and even though some of them have been going on all along, they have attributed some of those to reduction, and we work with them trying to help resolve that in meetings that we've had all along.
So I'm going to sort of pick up right here. In response to some of the changes that we were seeing in the protocol for calls to the fire department for assistance starting in mid-December, we actually had a meeting being the city manager's office, the county manager's office, the fire department, and EMS. So we had a meeting to discuss what was going on and how we could address the concerns of council, recognizing that this was a directive or a charge that you had given us to reduce the number of calls, and that first several months we were seeing a positive reduction somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40%, just as we had projected. So as we discussed with them we've been meeting over several months now, but a couple of options that we've discussed that are showing here. First one, of course, is to continue things as we currently are, to work with EMS and try to get them to recognize that this is a policy directive as established by City Council, that the Winston-Salem Fire Department will respond to life-threatening calls only, and for them to work with us to try to identify what those calls are that we should be responding to, but I think we had a good handle on what we should be responding to, recognizing that originally we thought we'd be responding to about 5,000 calls per year, and now it's north of 20,000 calls per year with the same number of personnel. So that was one of the options that we discussed was let's try to work out the directive that we've been given as a policy from City Council. Another concept that was discussed by the City Manager's Office was the possibility of going to, the County Manager's Office, was the concept of going to a voluntary tier responder program, almost like the old rescue squad concept, where they would use a pool of volunteers to actually respond to emergency medical calls. Of course, no one feels this is the best option for the residents of the city of Winston-Salem, because I think all of us have the end in mind of trying to provide quality service to the citizens when they need that assistance for those life-threatening emergencies. Then the last option that we've discussed as a group is the possibility of some type of stipend that we provided to the city. Currently there's a stipend program, and I don't know exactly how it works, but the county estimates that we receive about $75,000 per year under that concept if they were to provide the stipend similar stipend like they provide to the volunteer departments. Of course, one of the concerns with this is we get back into responding to those 20,000 plus calls a year. Again, very limited resources, not only the wear and tear on the equipment and the fuel calls, but just the wear and tear on our personnel and their ability to do their jobs that they were originally hired for as firefighters. Since our meetings with the county, we've actually, as a staff, city staff, talked about some other possible options that we could look at as well. One option, of course, is to figure out a way to take over the entire operation. There are other cities across the state that actually have some type of service that they provide through their fire departments, have a separate division that they provide that service through their fire departments. but also are able to charge for that service and actually collect a fee. Chief Farmer tells me that one of them is run to a point that it actually generates sufficient funds so that it covers its expenses, almost like an enterprise fund would. So that is an option that could be looked at. We've not done extensive research on that, but we could look at things such as a quick response unit as part of that, or figure out, so there are different options that we can look at if you all decide that that is a direction that we want to go into, to providing more services in this area as opposed to providing the services that we're currently providing. And then the last option, if we're unable to work anything out, and no one is recommending this, but of course another option is to just get out of it completely. Just stop going to emergency medical calls. Let the county provide those services as they're charged with doing, and we'll provide fire services as we're charged with doing. But that would be an option that could be considered if we're unable to figure out a way that we can work together with them.
Just want to emphasize, it's very important to note that in Winston, the people that are on the trucks do the bulk of the work. Other departments have a separate inspection division that does all the inspections. They have people in fire prevention that help with education programs and all the other services. But the people on the trucks, and some of them are here tonight, are the ones that take on all this additional workload. And just to be frank, the business of firefighting early in the morning, midday, late at night is quite dangerous, and we need to have firefighters sharp so that when they go into the buildings, they're sharp enough to deal with and recognize the hazards and things they must face as they deal with fire. So in summary, we feel that as a department, we want to be involved with medical calls. It just needs to be restricted based on the type of responses we need to go to and the number of people we have doing the delivery of the service. As you can see, 19,575 calls was what we responded to last year, and in terms of up to a 40% difference, reduction rather, you'll see that would yield somewhere just under 12,000 calls a year in this first stretch of medical reduction. It's been successful up to this point. Up to today, at least up to April 7th, when we did this report or completed this report, we were just under 10,000 calls in terms of actual responses, and last year around that same time we were just over 15,000 calls. And this is largely due to, first of all, not going to facilities where there are healthcare professionals, and certainly the other due to the reduction policies when we're not responding to the less serious calls. We would recommend that we continue to evaluate our call outcomes so that we can determine our continued next steps in this reduction process.
And Mr. Chairman, we do have Deputy County Manager Damon Sanders Pratt and Dan Osmick, who's the Emergency Management Services Director, here today, as well as I think the representatives from the fire department, as Chief Farmer alluded to.
Well, Chief Farmer, Mr. Page, you did receive, as you mentioned, a mandate from this committee and from this council to reduce the volume of calls for a number of reasons. So I do thank you for working very hard to do the task that you've been charged to do. Councilmember Light wishes to be heard. Before I recognize Councilmember Light, I will say that I believe that option number 1 and option number 2 at this time, members of the committee, I don't believe them to be viable options. I don't believe that getting completely out of the business and just turning over the business to volunteer emergency responders would be the proper thing to do in the spirit of public safety for our citizens. So with that in mind, I believe that options 3 and options 4, receiving a stipend possibly from the county and just taking a look at how we can get into the business ourselves might be the better option. Again, I am just speculating. I definitely want to hear from Mr. Sanders Pratt, Mr. Osmick. I noticed that our Professional Firefighters Association is here, led by Mr. Pollard. If you want to speak, we definitely want to hear from you. But before we do that, any questions for the Chief or Mr. Page? Councilmember Light.
Thank you. For either one of you, would you enlighten me, please, as to what does the EMS, county EMS, do for the citizens of Winston-Salem if they don't respond to emergency calls, since Winston-Salem pays the bulk of the taxes to the county?
Well, I'll let Mr. Osmond answer some of that, but in general, the EMS is responsible for county medical response, which includes the city. So they deliver medical services to the city. They're in the city and in the county jurisdiction. So technically, they are responsible for the delivery of the medical response, period.
Yes, and since city citizens pay county taxes, we supposedly should be able to depend on their services, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Councilmember Light, would you like to hear from Mr. Osmond?
In just a moment, but let me ask one more thing. The change in April, there was obviously a change in the triage. What was that? How did you manage that?
We basically, once we looked at the information, the data, and what we're responding to, the data showed basically that all the calls for breathing were being basically lumped, if I can use that term, or placed in the respiratory failure category. And so that's where those calls failed. So we basically made the respiratory failure the main category, and then had triage areas of types of response under that category.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Councilmember McIntosh. Thank you.
Couple quick questions. Do we have any estimate of what it costs us on the current setup to respond to, I'm going to call them EMS calls? What does it cost the fire department to respond?
Well, I guess it would depend on how you look at that. We can basically, if you look at the number of people on the truck and the response, that could go up to almost $1,000 per call when you look at the people in the route. Pretty much, the trucks, in terms of just direct travel, those trucks get up to about 4 miles per gallon, and so every time they go on a call, depending on the mileage, the immediate cost to operate and, of course, get there to use the equipment that we use is the main cost in there. So if a truck travels 8 miles round trip, then you're looking at that in terms of mileage. The challenge you have with mileage also, when a truck is out of service on a call, especially one where it's a call they probably shouldn't have gone to because they didn't have to do medical treatment, then another company has to go and do that service or go to their territory and do that. So those responses are typically longer. In addition to that, when companies have to go across territories back and forth and during their daily activities, if they're doing inspections and they get back-to-back medical calls, they go back and forth. That's also another fuel cost that we're trying to incorporate into the cost.
So long and short of it is, we don't get anywhere near the funding for what we spend to carry out the service. I mean,
No, sir.
A huge
No, sir.
imbalance.
No, sir.
I don't know enough about the county's EMS system, but how many field locations do they have?
How many what?
Field locations where they dispatch crews from?
In terms of the city?
I think it's 5. Mr. Osmond is recognized.
How many field locations do you have where you dispatch crews from within the county?
We have one dispatch center, and then we have an EMS crew where we run 4 units out of our main station. We run 1 unit out of Patterson Avenue. We run, which is the Forsyth Tech campus. We run 1 unit out of Liberty Street next to Engine 3. We run 1 unit at Forsyth Hospital. And then we also signal 20 our trucks, which is basically a concept. When those trucks get busy, we bring in our outer county trucks to city-county borderlines to fill void areas in the city. We run at an average of 16 units a day to cover the county and the city.
Thank you.
And Councilmember McIntosh, just to address a financial question that you asked earlier, another option that the city has presented us is looking at coming up with a different division that would take on an additional level of service. So with additional staff and with the additional level of service, it could potentially cost us in the area of $1 million from what the staff presentation has given us as well.
Thank you.
Councilmember Burke?
Oh, I don't have any comments right now.
All right.
Question, if
Councilmember Light?
to someone. what percentage of the county population is in the city?
About 60%, a little over 60%.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I imagine that the staff would like to have some direction. Mr. Sanders Pratt is here. If he wants to be heard, if any of the members of the Professional Firefighters Association would like to be heard, we'd like to carve out a little bit of time at this time for you to be heard before we move forward with a staff recommendation. And thank you for that presentation, Chief Farmer.
Thanks, Chief.
All right. Mr. Sanders Pratt is recognized for the Assistant County Manager, Deputy County Manager.
Deputy County Manager. Mr. Chairman and council members, I really just wanted to convey that the Board of Commissioners and the County Administration recognize that it is the City's Council's prerogative to determine the level of service for emergency response in Winston. The county has stood up a pretty robust EMS system for the whole county, but first response is a component that is provided by volunteer departments in the non-municipal areas. And in the city of Winston, the fire department provides the first response. That is a addition to EMS response. But everybody gets an EMS response. And then just really the issue at hand is first response and whether or not they can get there a little quicker or not. Don't dispute any of the things that were said today. Really kind of the question is about the protocols that our 911 dispatch uses to send people on calls. It is a medically driven, internationally recognized system that our 911 operators use. And basically what we've been kind of talking about back and forth is carving out pieces of that for what we consider like kind of a non-medical reason. And so our staff is still continuing to dispatch first responders, and then we're also dispatching ambulances as well to all calls in the city and in the county. But really just the discussion is more about whether we can carve out first response calls or should we send everybody on a similar first response, no matter what your life-threatening case might be. And that's really all I wanted to come back.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Sanders Pratt? Thank you, sir. I don't want to have to draft you, sir. Mr. Pollard? You won't. All right.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here representing the Winston-Salem professional firefighters, and I just want to start off by saying that we're in this business. You won't find a firefighter that doesn't get into this business to save lives. That's what we're here for. We're here to save lives and to protect the community in the city of Winston-Salem. So nobody wants to, get out of any kind of services when it comes to saving lives. The issue here, and some of the things, I'll just kind of echo some of the things, but again, with some of the options, when you talk about going to a fire-based EMS system, for example, just to give you some sort of perspective on that, in 2012, the fire department responded to over 19,000 medical calls. Those calls, for an ambulance, for example, that's $800 for an ambulance ride, and I think they say that they collect about 96% of that. So I'll let you do the math on those figures. And in the meantime, just like Chief said, we, typically 4 miles to the gallon in a fire truck, medical gloves, personnel cost, oxygen, pretty much at the minimum is what we're spending on every call. And this is not a concept, we're not reinventing the wheel here. This concept goes on everywhere. For example, Charlotte-Mecklenburg County, Mecklenburg County pays a stipend of about $100 per call to Charlotte Fire Department. So the $75,000, I'm not really sure where that figure came from for us, but that, that's nowhere close to $100 per call, again, if you look at the call volume. Again, there's other options out there too, that's not really being discussed in terms of, if you look at, for example, Guilford County, and just to give you an idea, but they use a different dispatch system, a complete different protocol. It's called Alpha Bravo Charlie. It's completely different. They're not getting dispatched. Their fire department's not getting dispatched to toothaches and to toe aches and a lot of the issues that we run. They don't have that because of the way that their calls are triaged under a different system. So there are other solutions out there as well, and I'm just bringing this to the forefront so that you know that there are options out there that can be looked at as well. That doesn't appear at this point. I'm not sure that they haven't been presented anyway. I won't say they haven't been looked at, but I will say that there are other options out there. Again, I want to make it perfectly clear that we are not here in any way, shape, or form to do any kind of a disservice to the citizens of Winston-Salem. It's actually the very opposite. We want to offer better service. And the way that we do this, I think if you went and polled all the citizens of Winston-Salem and you asked them, would you rather know that you have a fire truck coming on a medical emergency when you know you have an ambulance coming? Or do you want to know that you have a fire truck coming if your house is on fire? Because essentially that's what we're talking about here, one of the problems. If we're hung up on a medical call that, for example, that's a toothache, that ends up being something that we could never do any service for that citizen to begin with. And we run a lot of those calls. A lot of the calls, for example, diabetic calls, seizure calls, we don't carry the medication to treat that. So essentially all we're doing is waiting on EMS to get there when we show up. That's all we're doing. We don't transport in fire trucks, so we have no way to transport the patients, which I think, again, if you polled the citizens of Winston-Salem, because we see this out in the field every day. We show up and the citizens are like, what are you guys doing here? We call for an ambulance. You can't take me to the hospital. So we can't transport to begin with. So, you know, if you take and you were to poll the citizens of Winston-Salem, I believe that you would find out that for us to be stuck on a call that we have no business being at to begin with, and there is a true emergency within our first-in territory, for example, a fire where every single second counts. I mean, even with the fire fatalities that we had at the beginning of this year, almost every single one of those fatalities was found just inches within the door. So that's how close they were to getting out. So every single second counts. So that's what we're talking about here at the end of the day. It's making sure that we can still provide the absolute best service for the citizens. And until we explore every single option, I'm not really sure that we are able to do that. So that's what I got.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
I was just going to comment that those two options that the head of the local Professional Firefighters Association mentioned, we're not in a position to, we have discussed those. The county chooses their EMS protocol for dispatch. You'd have to ask the county if they wanted to change it, and they have not wanted to change it. The other one, we have discussed with the county a compensation, and they've agreed to do is to offer the $75,000 stipend, which equates to the standby fee that they pay volunteers. It's so much per station, and they've turned that into how much it would be for the city.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard? Mr. Osmond?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. First of all, I want to say that Dr. Olson, our medical director, he was the one that was supposed to be here and address the issues at hand, and due to an unfortunate emergency within his family, he had to leave this morning for Florida. So under those circumstances, what I would like to do is just sort of educate you just a little bit in regards to what happens when someone calls 911 in the city of Winston-Salem. And when someone calls 911 inside the city of Winston-Salem, if the city dispatcher determines that it is a medical emergency, that call gets transferred to the county 911 center. Then there's a series of questions through the emergency medical dispatch called APCO. APCO is the Association of Professional Communication Officials. And this is a national standard that is reviewed and approved by multiple ER physicians serving on a national board. And it's a triage system. And we label our calls priority 1, priority 2, priority 3. Priority 1 is all life-threatening emergencies. Priority 2 and 3 are non-life-threatening emergencies. We have never dispatched the City of Winston-Salem Fire Department on priority 2 and priority 3 non-life-threatening emergencies. We have only requested first responder response on priority 1 calls, which were deemed through the triage process and the questions and answers that are set up on a computer, that the communicator asks the individual that calls 911 if there's something there that triggers a life-threatening, potential life-threatening emergency, it becomes a priority 1 call. If it does not trigger a priority 1, which is a non-life-threatening emergency call, priority 2 or 3, the city of Winston-Salem Fire Department and all of the first responders throughout the county do not get dispatched on those type of calls. So what happens is during that questioning and answering period of the caller, once that priority trigger is met, that call is handed down to another communicator who calls back the city 911 dispatch and gives them the nature of the call, the nature of the complaint. And the city has a list of calls that the city of Winston-Salem first responder, the city fire department, has agreed to respond on. If it meets that criteria, then the city of Winston-Salem Fire Department is dispatched on that life-threatening emergency. However, there is also some life-threatening emergencies on a do not respond list that the city does not go on. But because of the information that is provided by the caller, it becomes a priority one call, a potential life-threatening emergency. And so the bottom line is that the city of Winston-Salem Fire Department's first responder program does not go on all life-threatening, potential life-threatening emergencies. The thing that we also do is these are the regulations for emergency medical dispatch, and there are multiple types of priority dispatch systems, one of which was mentioned earlier. All of these categorize calls, and we have looked at Charlotte-Mecklenburg, and we have looked at Guilford County, and we have compared the Alpha Bravo concept in comparison to the APCO emergency medical dispatch. And there is some differences. We know that there are some differences. And I've talked to Mecklenburg, and I've talked to Guilford County, and they have the same problem, just like all fire departments and first responders throughout the county and every city. We can only dispatch the information that is given to us by the caller. That is no different than when a police department gets dispatched on an emergency call, whether it be in the county or the city, and they get this information by the caller, and they get there, and that information that was given by the caller has nothing to do with why they were sent. And in multiple times, these are not emergencies, and sometimes they're not even situations that requires a whole lot of intervention by the police. In the same concept recurs every day on fire dispatches, 800 and some fire dispatches. Of those 800 and some fire dispatches, there's multiple fire alarms. There's all kinds of reasons why people call the fire department, and the fire department gets there, and it's not really a true emergency. So that is the system as it is in all of public safety, not just EMS, not just the police department and the fire department. If you took the total number of calls and the police department handles and the fire department handles, both city and county, and that EMS handles, there's multiple times when even we get there. We even know that we shouldn't have been called in the first place. But you can only go with what the information that you get when the caller calls 911. So yes, the county is by state regulations required to handle and oversee all of the medical emergency response within the county. The first responder program is the most important component of a tiered system. The first responders, because of their locations throughout the county and the city, get there within a 2 to 3 minute time frame, and then the EMS ambulances with paramedics get there within a 5 to 6 to 7 minute response. But the most important component of, and survival rates show this, is the basic level care that is administered by the county first responders and the city first responders. The brain can only go 2 or 3 minutes without oxygen, and there have been multiple occasions where people have survived by the intervention that's provided by the first responders, whether it be the county fire departments or the Winston-Salem Fire Department. The old adage of EMTs and first responders save paramedics. What that means is what the initial care given in those first critical minutes is what gives us the opportunity as paramedics to provide advanced level care. But if those first few things aren't done in the first few minutes, all the drugs and all the equipment and all that expensive equipment that's on ambulances doesn't make a difference. It's what's done in those first few critical minutes. And the city of Winston-Salem has multiple fire departments throughout the community. And just like in multiple communities throughout the United States, the first response tier is dependent on those fire departments getting to that life-threatening emergency within a very short time frame. And that's what makes the difference in outcomes of patients. So I think it's important that you understand that we have been working back and forth over the course of the last several months. And there have been situations where, because of some negative outcomes on the City of Winston-Salem Fire Department not going, they have tiered up and added back into the response time, such as respiratory calls. And respiratory situation seems to be the major issue here. If someone calls 911 and they say that they're having trouble breathing, and we can only get so much information out of that, someone having trouble breathing, or what is commonly referred to as respiratory failure, that is respiratory failure. When someone is having difficulty moving air in and out, that's respiratory failure. They don't go on all respiratory failure calls. They have picked which type of calls that they go on. And so I have a letter from Dr. Awesome that I'd like to sort of present to the board, and there's multiple copies. And since he couldn't be here today, I'd just like you to take the opportunity at a later time to read that. And on the back of that is a list of the calls that the Winston-Salem Fire Department has agreed to go on, and there's also a list of the life-threatening emergencies that they have chosen not to go on. And with that said, I'll just end in closing by saying that one of three things happen after a life-threatening call is received, and the emergency first responders are dispatched. The subject is better upon our arrival than they were when the emergency call was received. The subject is worse upon our arrival when they were dispatched, when the emergency call was received, or the subject is the same upon our arrival. Emergency dispatch or responders don't know which of these is the case until they arrive. That's no different than the police department. That's no different than the fire department when they respond on fire calls. The information they get may not at all reflect what they have when they get there. So I'll entertain any questions that you have at this point.
Are there any questions, Mr. Osment? Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Chief Farmer? Councilman Burke.
While Mr. Osborne is sitting down, I'll say again, when we had the Making Our City and County Safe, you did a very good presentation, and it was appreciated. Thank you. Chief Farmer, how often do you have a record? If you don't have it, you can get it. People call for the same thing. In some neighborhoods, people would say they would see the emergency management and a fire truck going to the same place, and it goes so many times that they ask not to put your sirens on.
We do have several what our fire people will call repeat offenders, or simply people who they go to all the time. They know them by name. I don't have that exact number with me right now, but numerous territories has them. I'm sure some of the firemen here right now could call out names of people. We actually try to put a policy in place to sort of filter out, if you will, the people that we continue to go to that don't have a medical issue. However, if they're treated by EMS, then we don't enforce that policy. But there are numerous people that are repeat people that we repeatedly go to on a regular basis.
So, may I continue?
Councilman Burke?
So maybe at another time you can get me the record, and then it will show me, as I've heard both of you all speak, three of you rather, speak about the costs involved when it comes to the fire truck, the equipment, and the time for the person who's actually on the fire truck.
Yes, ma'am.
Taking care of that responsibility.
Okay. Councilman McIntosh, do you have a question for Chief Homer?
No. Comment in general.
Okay.
Time.
If I may.
Sure.
Thank you, Chief Homer. I definitely believe that the primary role of EMS is pretty much what it says, emergency management services. I also believe that the primary function of our Winston-Salem Fire Department is firefighting and fire suppression. So with that being said, I believe that the two entities must work together like we have been, and I believe that we should continue to work together. Members of the committee, as the chair of the committee, I will say that I believe that we should give the staff just a little bit of direction. I'm coming to you, Councilman McIntosh. It would be my suggestion that we direct the city staff to continue to negotiate with the county to determine if calls can be triaged under a different system, and to kind of figure out if we can get to a number that we can all agree on as a stipend for responding to emergency services calls. In the interim, I would say that we should also investigate the idea of going into the business ourselves to determine everything that involves, the type of money it involves, whether or not we can turn a profit, the partnerships that we can develop between the state, between our federal government, and between our county. And I believe that it is incumbent upon us to always measure 10 times and cut once. With that being said, I just wanted to shape the framework for our discussion. Councilman McIntosh.
I don't know the county personnel that well, but I've gotten to know the city first responders, I think, pretty well so far. And I don't doubt that everybody's in this for the right reason. To me, this is a question of resources. We're providing the service and not getting reimbursed for the resources. I don't think it should be a turf war between who's doing a good job, because I think everybody's out to do a good job, and I think that's done. So to me, it's about fairness and compensation for the services that we provide. It does seem like a situation that's full of duplication of services from an MIS standpoint, from a management standpoint, from a real estate standpoint. It seems like we've got a lot of assets that are not being fully utilized. And I'm with Chairman that I think there's probably a lot of room for combining services, taking it under our wing, try to pull some efficiencies out of the business, but at minimum, getting more equitably reimbursed for the services that we provide.
Does anybody else wish to be heard on the committee?
Oh, I will say
Councilman
that
Burke?
I agree with both of you and Mr. McIntosh. I've received service from both the city and the county, and they have always been very positive and pleasant and very effective and efficient in how they carried out their duties. And when you have people who work like that, the individuals who are ill, it makes them more comfortable. So you do work hard.
All right. So with that being said, Mr. Osment, would you like to be recognized again?
I just want to make one comment. In regards to the collection of 96%, just for the record, it's about 46% that we get recouped through Medicare, Medicaid, and private pay. It's not 96%. And the other thing that I'll end with is we got a great working relationship with all of the first responders in the county and the city, and especially the city fire department. When things need to get done, they get done. They get done in a uniformed fashion, and there are no turf battles. And I've been throughout this state and the county and the nation, and just to see some of the things that are going on in some of the municipalities across the United States. We've got an excellent system here, 2 excellent hospitals, and yes, some things need to be tweaked, and we're going to continue to work on things that need to be tweaked a little bit. And we have entertained the thought of looking at other medical priority dispatch systems, and we're presently evaluating that. So our goal is just like their goal, and the police department's goal is to provide the best service to the citizens of both Winston-Salem and Forsyth County, and to keep the quality of service are where it needs to be.
Thank you, sir. Mr. City Manager, between now and the next committee meeting, I think the direction of the council, of the committee is clear. We'd like you to work on negotiations with the county to see if we can reach a number that we can all be comfortable with, because I don't believe that we're comfortable with the $75,000 as a proper compensation. Secondly, we'd ask that you evaluate taking on EMS services ourselves as a city and continue to give us information on how we move forward with that option. As I look around the committee, is that the general consensus?
Yes.
And we'd like you to do that by the next committee meeting, and we'd like to move forward because the calls are continuing to come in, and we want to make sure that we're doing a valuable service to our county, but we also want to make sure that we're representing our fire department and our citizens to the best of our ability.
Okay. The study may take longer than 30 days, but we'll report back to you what we can find out in 30 days. It's a pretty major initiative to take over medical. We'll bring back what we can find out in 30 days.
We can at least begin discussions in 30 days. Is there any other business? Does anybody else wish to be heard with anything for the good of the order? Chief Roundtree is recognized.
Good evening, Chairman Taylor and members of the Public Safety Committee. I will be brief. I know the hour is late. What I want to do is introduce our new captain, Captain Katrina Thompson.
Yeah.
If she would come forward.
Captain Thompson.
She was promoted to captain March 31st, 2014. She's a 20-year veteran of the police department. She graduated undergraduate from Wayne State University and has a master's degree from Appalachian State University. And she will be the commander of our Criminal Investigations Division.
All right.
Like to say a few words.
If you would give us your name and title for the record, we just want to hear you say it.
I'm Katrina Thompson. I'm the captain of the Criminal Investigations Division of the Winston-Salem Police Department. I am excited about serving the citizens of Winston-Salem in my new role as police captain, and I look forward to strengthening the partnerships that we have with our citizens, our community leaders, and area law enforcement agencies in reducing violent crime in our city.
Thank you, Captain Thompson. And I believe Councilmember Burke wants to say a couple of words.
Yes, I had told them I was down at the Public Safety Center when we were having our overall meeting about the safety in this community, and I looked around and I said, women, this is the time for women. Keep that in mind. And as you know, around the country, people are talking about the roles women play, how good we are in what we do, how understanding we are in what we do. All we say is, let us be on equal playing ground. Women, women. And some people may not know it, but your husband worked for police department. And where is he now?
Spartan? Yes, ma'am. My husband was a police officer with our agency for 29 and a half years. He retired as assistant chief on January 31st. And on February 1st, he started his new position as the chief of Spartanburg Police Department in South Carolina.
We trained them well, don't we, City Manager?
We do.
Thank you, Captain Thompson.
Thank you.
Chief Roundtree, thank you. At this time, is there anything else for the good of the order? If not, we will consider this meeting of the Public Safety Committee to be adjourned. Thank you.